So today we're going to talk about bridges. So how they started, how they grew so fast, what were the challenges, and what do we believe that going to be the next steps, right? And this is why we have here invisible, right? Because this is what we think is going to be the future, and we see how and why we're going to achieve that. Some stuff about me: I'm a product manager at Chainsafe. And at the moment, I'm dealing with cross-chain, centralized applications, and the chain bridge, which is a product we are working on now. Before that, I was around 10 years in traditional finance tech. So why bridges existed historically? Just to connect ecosystems, right? But in the very beginning, it was just a simple way for new ecosystem, new blockchains to unwrap new users and funds. So this graph is interesting. It shows why we're living in actually a multi-chain world, right? So it shows from around August 2020 till 2022, and this is the total value locked, the total amount of funds of the most popular blockchains. And as you can see, around end of 2022, it was mostly everything on Ethereum, right? So it was like 95% the dominance, as we say. And around beginning of 2021, we see this graph kind of changing. The yellow is Binance Chain, and then we had Polygon, we had Avalanche, we had Phantom, Optimism, all this kind of stuff. So they start to take a piece of the pie of Ethereum. So, and right now Ethereum is just 60%, right? So quite a lot of funds and money in all the other new ecosystems. How this happened? With bridges. And this is another graph that basically shows the growth of bridges in a similar timeline. This just shows the last year, so from May 2021 till now. And it grew significantly, right? So these are the bridges from Ethereum to many other ecosystems, from almost zero to around 20 billion, and we calculated roughly the total amount bridged in this period of time from any network to any other network was more than $90 billion. So quite a lot of funds, right? And here the question is, what fueled all this bridge growth and ecosystem growth? What was the actual reason? And one of the important factors was all this new blockchain ecosystem incentives, right? So here we have just 3 examples from Phantom, Near, and Avalanche, but there are millions, dozens more. Every new ecosystem just initiated some incentives, so new users will come and use the blockchain, right? So a specific example is Avalanche. For example, if we look at the data from one of the graphs we saw before, they started an incentive program of $100 million back in August in 2021. Their TVL back then as an ecosystem was 250 million. And in December, it was 13 billion, right? So 52 times increase. That's huge, right? And apparently this was because of these incentives, right? Amongst other things, because it's also maybe great tech, I assume. This is a kind of a graph showing a bit how this flywheel growth happened, right, with this ecosystem. So in the beginning you see a new blockchain ecosystem is created, then they announce some kind of incentives, then new developers, teams start to deploy contracts and dApps on this new ecosystem, then the bridges are created or extended, then the users finally can just, bridge their funds over, then the TVL and the whole activity goes up, everybody's happy, the validators, the miners, and then a new kind of circle can start either with new incentives or just a new ecosystem coming in, right? And this goes on and on and on. This is what we saw basically, from 2020 till now with all of these ecosystems. The majority of this bridge activity so far has been just profit driven, right? Wherever is incentive, let's bring all the funds there, then bring to the next one, and so forth. So one problem that this led was silos and fragmentation. So here we have 4 of the most popular decentralized applications: Curve, Aave, SushiSwap, OpenSea, and these are the blockchains where they are deployed, right? So I think the king here is SushiSwap with 17 different blockchains. The problem here is that they are most probably the same smart contracts, but they don't communicate with each other, right? So the liquidity on Curve on Ethereum mainnet has nothing to do with the one on Polygon, right? And this is okay for now, but this will be definitely a problem in the future. So we had to use bridges, right, to go from Ethereum Curve, for example, to Polygon Curve. And how was the user experience? It was pretty bad, right? So that was one, I remember one of the first bridges I tried to use. I mean, that was really in the early days. And I was trying to find which is the right stablecoin, USD, right? And I think there are 15 different, maybe there are more. So you cannot figure out which one should you use and why. And more UX issues. So this standardization problem we just mentioned, every kind of bridge UI had their own user experience and interaction. You know, there was no standardization. Every time you had to look, you know, understand a different app, right? There were some weird rules. As an example is the optimism, bridging back to mainnet in the beginning was really weird. Like, why should I wait 7 days, right? I mean, for people that understood this technically, it was okay, but for people who are not, you know, that technically advanced, they say, why? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Also, we had issues of locked funds that users had to, I don't know, call some technical support or write in a Telegram channel to someone trying to unlock their funds. That's also far from optimal. And yeah, in the end of the day, we ended up in the following problem that we had more than 20 different bridge apps and UIs, and there is no silver bullet. There's no like one bridge that ruled them all, right? There was always design and technical trade-off. So the user always had to find which is the best bridge for the job. So some of them are more trustless, but they don't support enough ecosystem. Some of them, they are cheaper or faster, but they are less trustless. Some of them have more liquidity, but not enough assets. So always you had to look and find what fits better in that specific case. And yeah, the elephant in the room, which is security. I mean, this is, I think it was a drift, so it's supposed to move, but you know, this is more or less how I felt when I was trying to use bridges the last year, you know, like running and just bombs here and there, because just for the record, the 3 out of the 5 biggest hacks that ever happened were on bridges and happened the last 9 months. So it was not a good year for bridges in general. So a more concrete bridging scenario. Yeah, we don't have to go through all this. This is just, we want to show that there's 13 different steps and transactions that a user has to do if they want to go through this scenario, which is quite popular, that they have some liquidity on Curve on mainnet, and they just want to bring this liquidity to Polygon Curve just because of incentives or whatever reason. They have to go through all this stuff, right? And the bottom line is that it's not for the everyday user, it's just for some DeFi power users, right? And we have to improve that. So the way forward, how we can really improve all these problems we showed. We look it up from the user perspective, right? So the users should be able to do all this bridging stuff directly from the wallet, or the portfolio manager should be able to do money market transactions like lending, for example, without moving their collateral from any other chain. The yield aggregators, for example, should not work in silos, should be cross-chain. DEXs should be also cross-chain. Users should be able to market NFTs in any chain they want. They don't have to, you know, manually try to move or wrap things. And yeah, in general, users should not necessarily always use a bridge UI, right? Should be able to do a lot of stuff without the bridge UI. Yeah, so how to achieve that? So there are 3 points we have identified as the most important steps for bridge protocols to improve and build on. So we achieve this user experience improvements we just mentioned. So number one is generalized message passing. So the protocols, the bridge protocols, should focus more on bridging messages from ecosystem to ecosystem, not only token transferring like USDC, ETH, and so forth. The bridge protocol should also provide SDKs for DApp developers, like sophisticated SDKs that will encapsulate all this complexity that bridge and cross-chain transactions entail. So the DApp developers and protocol developers can focus only on what matters, right, for the users, and not on the complexity of doing cross-chain stuff. And of course, all this standardization, right, of assets and the user experience. We cannot have anymore, everyone that implements kind of a bridge interface, they implement it their own way. We need to start converging to something common. Yeah, the key takeaways. So cross-chain is here to stay. It's not going to be that. Like 2 years ago, we're saying, okay, who is going to be the Ethereum killer? Ethereum is going to be there or not? We see that now is actually reality, that we have not only multi-chain, but we start to have cross-chain applications, right? But the UX is far from optimal. We need to improve the UX. There is no one-size-fits-all. We also know that, so there is always trade-offs, design trade-offs, security trade-offs that need to be done. And these need to be clearly communicated by the bridge developers, so the users and the protocol developers know exactly what they're dealing with, right? And they use the right bridge protocol for the job. And yeah, as we mentioned, ideally, bridges should be quite invisible, right? For many of the end user use cases. Yeah, and some exciting announcements. So on what I mentioned in the beginning, the product we're working on, ChainBridge, we are working on a new version of it, which will be released end of June. And it has some, we're focusing mostly on providing infrastructure and tooling to protocol and DApp developers that want to implement their cross-chain use cases, right? So that's our main goal here. And I have 2 QR codes. I have to clearly explain now what is each one of them. I was very hesitant to put 2 QR codes on the same page, but so the one here on the left, the cross-chain survey is for developers who are thinking or are having challenges with anything cross-chain. So what we just mentioned before, right, that for example, you might have your protocol deployed on several chains, right? And you want to find ways to make this communicate with each other. So this will help you, because we have some features, for example, there that might be useful for you. So you can also leave your contacts, and then we can get back to you and discuss more on that, and maybe slowly find a solution and help you implement that. Actually, let me ask here in the room, do we have people with such challenges that are really working on a blockchain protocol and are thinking of cross-chain implementations? Maybe raise hands. I know the guys over there. Okay, cool. I see a couple. And the right one is a pilot program for cross-chain dApps that we want to kick off on beginning of July. So this is for protocols and dApps that are having a more concrete vision, a more concrete plan, what they want to do. And after we release the ChainBridge Hub in end of June, beginning of July, we want to work together with some of these teams and support them implementing this cross-chain vision they have in mind. So feel free to just leave your information there and a couple of more info on what exactly you're looking for, and we can get back to you and work together on that. And I think that's it. Any questions? We have a question. We have a question. Oh, you can either. Yeah, I can repeat it maybe, or yeah.
Yeah, sure. So it's a two-tiered question. First of all, in terms of like future of the bridges, do you see like multiple bridges winning, or just a few that are like going to solve some crucial issues? And secondly, I'll try to summarize it in a way. So what are your thoughts on bridge aggregators? Because all of the bridges basically have a lot of limitations. So thinking from a UX perspective, they basically support either like native stablecoins or native assets. So you're still basically sending your user to a DEX to, like, if they have like a random token, they need to exchange to a token that bridge supports, right? Secondly, because of different like architecture, like security architecture of the bridges, you can do a vendor lock-in, and then someone later on comes in, does a better bridge, but your user's assets are basically locked into that one like smart contract, and they're not composable, so like another bridge can just use those assets, or you can't replace it later on. So like, what are your views on the aggregators pretty much? And does it make more sense for a DApp to actually go aggregator route versus doing one bridge which has a lot of its limitations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I actually think aggregators have a place that definitely makes sense, especially for the token bridging part, right? Because now if my use case is I just want to bridge this kind of token from this chain to this chain, I have like 8 different options, and I don't want to look each one of them. I want to go to an aggregator that will find the fastest and cheapest, most probably. That's for sure. But in terms of these cross-chain use cases, like to protocol remote kind of communication, I'm not sure how an aggregator there can help. And yeah, I totally agree with this kind of vendor lock-in risk, because I mean, if you have if whoever has looked a bit deeper into the this remote communication protocol to protocol is quite hard, and you need to implement. It's not generic, right? You need to implement contracts that's specifically made for this reason, right? So I think it's a risk that you have to take. I don't see another way, right, to make some kind of generic, one size again fits all kind of message passing protocol.
But in terms of an aggregator, for example, they can still do a contract call on the destination chain, right? So they can still call like a contract call and still do cross-chain swap and stake, cross-chain swap and zap into a pool, with the possibility of actually having more routes, right? And on top of that, if you're an aggregator and you implement, I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 bridges, then you basically can tell to like the DApps, oh, this is your user base, this is the volume they're bridging, so this is the perfect route for you. Or you're aiming more for security, let me optimize the routing for you specifically, versus a bridge that's very limited in that sense, right? Because like the contract calling, aggregator can implement that as well. Like it's not exclusively tied to the bridges, right?
Yeah, it makes sense, and then you have vendor login to the aggregator, right? So I mean, yeah, no, I totally get your point. I mean, what we're trying to do, and what is my opinion on that, is like we need to make a protocol, like a framework, right? And try to help like DApps with very specific use cases. And you know, we know that you need to really sit down and implement each one of those one by one, right? It's not like, okay, I'm making a cross DEX kind of thing, which is, you know, it can be generalized that easily. So I'm focusing more on that, let's say, market. The one you mentioned, you're totally right? When you have like cross-chain DEX stuff and you have 10 bridges doing this crossing, yeah, you can optimize them with the aggregator. Definitely makes sense. I don't know if we have another question, follow up. I cannot see. Most probably no. Okay, thank you guys.